Alright, so I've been researching the Funimation Blu-rays and the DVDs, but on my way to doing so, discovered something that was honestly bizarre. I thought I was one of the people who was in the know concerning the redubbing of those few seasons, but this isn't the show that we remember. Oh no. Okay, so look, take this for example, okay? This is what aired originally back in the day for those that didn't know.
Well, now you've got it. Ha, you're not as dumb as you look.
Seems normal, right? Yeah, because it is! It is normal! Okay, this is what's actually on modern box sets.
Now you've got it. Ha, at least you're not as dumb as I am.
What?!
At least you're not as dumb as I am.
I have no idea how there isn't a big video on YouTube about this. How? And this is because, just wait for it, Funimation secretly changed a whole lot about their dub of Dragon Ball Z when the show came to DVD and Blu-ray, and it's come to my attention that no one on YouTube seems to be covering it. Until today. Last week on the channel, we went through the ins and outs of Dragon Ball Z's DVD releases and how they all are kind of cursed in one way or several, but one of the most common comments we received on that video was about which version people could experience their childhood with, aka which version has the English dub with the Bruce Faulconer music that hit all of our collective airwaves when Britney Spears was hitting our babies one more time. Well, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is, if all you are after is hearing the Funimation dub with the Faulconer music, then basically every single DVD and Blu-ray you can get your hands on has you covered. Wow, short video, right? Go team! Wrong! Because you're forgetting the bad news. And the bad news is that it's a lot more complicated than just that, because here's the thing. Those changes I mentioned, there's a lot of them, and some of them are the most insane stuff I have ever seen come out of a professional production. These secret changes were not advertised, they weren't mentioned in a blog post. Hell, some of them I am 99% certain Funimation doesn't even realize they changed to begin with. So, strap in folks, because I fell deep down into the rabbit hole of the Funimation dub and discovered some things that no one seems to have covered in detail before, and by the end I think I may have gone a little clinically insane. Where do I even begin here? You see, the further I dove down this proverbial rabbit hole as I tirelessly researched for this video, the more and more differences I uncovered. We've got big stuff like redubs of entire seasons, changes to character voices, rewritten scripts, accidentally putting lines in the wrong place. I'll get to that. But yeah, just the whole 9 yards. So I guess I'll start with the stuff they did on purpose. And yes, be prepared for the on-accident stuff later because it gets wild. Let's take a look at the very first and most obvious change they made. The voices. And that all started with replacing the Ocean dub. Yeah, that Rock the Dragon intro you just listened to was probably a blast from the past, eh? Been a while since you've heard that one. Well, there's actually a very good reason for that. Some of this you might already know, but it's worth repeating for context. Prior to the Shimmels and Sabbats of the modern era, Dragon Ball Z, in its first few seasons, had a completely different set of voice actors and music. Most people know this, but it actually had a lot of consequences for the dub that came after. This first dub was called the Pioneer or Ocean dub, and it was still headed up by Funimation at the time, but contracted out to the Canadian-based company Ocean Group for their voice actors and music. And thus, you get the Rock the Dragon intro and the different music done by Ron Wasserman and all the different voice actors.
It's over 9,000! What?
Then, of course, after a few seasons, Funimation decided to take the reins, at which point we swapped over to the voice cast and music that we all know and love today. Sean Schimmel, Christopher Sabat, the Faulconer score, the whole crew was on board from season 3 on, and everything was peachy keen. The problem came a few years later when, for the first time, they decided to release an entire box set for the whole series. Because, as you can imagine, marathoning your box set at home and suddenly having Vegeta go from sounding like this...
So, it happened. After 3,000 years, another Super Saiyan has emerged.
...to this...
Oh, they don't deserve any favors. They're scum Kakarot, believe me.
...would be quite the jarring experience. So, their solution was to go back to those first couple seasons and basically just redo the whole thing from scratch. They yeeted the old voices and music, had the Funimation voice crew go back and redo all the lines with pretty much the exact same script.
It's over 9,000!
And thus, the complete Funimation dub was born! The entire cast we were used to was there in full force for the Saiyan arc, and while the Faulconer score did not reprise its role for the soundtrack, they did hire Nathan Johnson, who is now literally a state senator by the way, to compose an updated soundtrack for the arc that was intended to transition into into the later Falconer score a little more gracefully than the original Ocean score did. In addition to all of this, while they were doing the redubs for the first 2 seasons, they figured it was a pretty good opportunity to go back and clean up some of their, let's say, less polished performances from their original dub of the 3rd season.
Nemec's great, you can't beat it.
Yeah, good old Namek, where balls are born.
Now, I joke, but a lot of the changes to Season 3's dub were not so much trying to fix bad performances, but instead more so trying to deal with a specific quirk of that 3rd season. Because, well, let's step back and think about things chronologically for a second. It's the late 90s. Ocean Group had just finished dubbing 2 seasons of their show with their own cast, and Funimation is now taking over the dub with their new actors. But for the audience at home, they're not privy to any of this. They are just sitting there slurping up their Danimals like usual, turning on to the next episode of this sick new cartoon they've been watching. And so Funimation's goal with their new dub cast was to sort of have their voices almost be imitations of the Ocean dub. And as a result, the voices from the Funimation crew sound very weird in that first season they dubbed to what we all know today. Sean Schimmel's Goku sounded like this.
There's no need to be scared of me. Just say you're sorry for what you've done and leave, and no harm will come to you.
Christopher Sabat's Vegeta was a lot higher pitched to match Brian Drummond's Vegeta.
Don't think I did this to save your puny hides. I had my own score from long ago to settle with that froggish four-eyed freak.
I remember those guys. If you think they're going to tip the scale in your favor, then you're out of your mind. If you're going to make a wish, make it a doozy.
And Frieza's entire casting was largely just trying to match what came before. But again, if you're marathoning these new box sets they were trying to put out, what's the experience going to be like? You're going to watch 2 seasons of Funimation's redub, where everyone sounds how you expect with their new redone dub. Then you hit season 3 and boom, suddenly Vegeta sounds like a teenager. So to combat this, Funimation went through and had a lot of the dialogue from some of their most standout voices re-recorded to fit better with the rest of the series. And I mean, this sort of makes sense. Season 3 was voiced in such a way that matched the original Ocean dub. But we don't have that anymore, so the new dub from that point on was required. Therefore, the version you watch at home now, instead of this Vegeta,
That's the dragon of the legend. My gosh, that's one whopper of a lizard.
you get this Vegeta.
They summoned him. The Earthlings have tried to summon the Dragon of Legend without me.
With all of that said, we have now reached a point in the video where everything begins to go a little off the rails and begin to fall into a never-ending pit of insanity with no guarantee of return to mental stability. Passengers must keep their hands and arms inside the vehicle and remain seated at all times, because so far everything has made pretty good sense. Redubbing the Ocean seasons? Sure. Redoing some of those weird or bad voices from Season 3? Yeah, makes sense. Sounds like these box sets are ready to go. Because now we have entered the Oopsie Daisy Funimation did a little fucky wucky section of the video. In classic Funimation fashion, they seem to be permanently incapable of releasing Dragon Ball Z for the home audience without breaking things along the way. And oh boy, did they break a lot here. Let's start with my personal favorite, line flubs. The clip back at the very beginning of the video with Piccolo declaring how dumb he is obviously a good example to start with here. I have no idea how that made it in past the filtering process of Funimation, whether it be a complete accident or a cheeky intern sneaking in a funny outtake, but it is there. Check your DVD if you don't believe me.
At least you're not as dumb as I am.
And this sort of thing isn't even a one-off. Multiple times while digging through these releases, I would come across lines that are just not meant to be there at all. Like this bit in episode 36 where King Kai is explaining the history of Planet Namek, but then suddenly is talking about the history of the Saiyans on planet Vegeta.
Planet Namek was once a very beautiful place. It was very much like the Earth, lush and green with an abundance of varieties. In the arid wastelands of Vegeta, the Saiyans lived in primitive fashion.
I did some digging, and this line is meant to be from episode 20, when, naturally, King Kai is explaining the history of the Saiyans. Once again, I just have to imagine that this is either the result of a rush production, or some funny little Funimation intern having a laugh. If only that was where the mistakes ended, however. Next, we have an entire category of music changes. A lot of folks like to bully the Falconer score online, and to them I say that Funimation has literally gone and made the music purposely worse in these home releases compared to what aired originally. Take this clip for example. Everyone is up on the lookout, wistfully remembering the life of Goku as he has agreed to stay dead. And in the original broadcast, the music that plays here is a lovely track that is just packed to the brim with emotion and nostalgia.
Yeah,
Well, Goku's been that way ever since he was little. It's like nothing ever got to him.
Then, as if by an act of intentional sabotage, you have the music that plays in the home releases.
Yeah, well, Goku's been that way ever since he was little. It's like nothing ever got to him.
Yep, that's right. Gone are the sweet dulcet tones of that music, and in its place is this standard dire flashback music. Stuff like this is honestly everywhere. You almost literally cannot go through a single episode without some sort of musical change. The scene with Goku having a nightmare about the androids? Well, while the original matches that tone with some appropriately creepy music,
Stop it! Stop it right now!
the box sets seem to think this is a comedy scene.
Stop it! Stop it right now!
And don't even get me started on how these box sets love to replace music with the perfect Cell theme.
Mr. Perfect Cell.
Going back and checking the earlier versions, I was really blown away by how much more diverse the music was in the original in general. Like, don't get me wrong, the theme is cool, really cool. I'm down for some do 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 do. But they can only use it so many times before I begin to lose what's left of my reason. All of this isn't even to mention the bigger changes, like replacing the opening and eye-catch music. Then, aside from all of this, there are the changes made to the audio mixing itself. In what was presumably an effort to fix up some of the relatively sloppy mixing of the third season, Funimation overhauled all of the mixing for the entire series. And the consequences of this are... yeah. The music fluctuates from being too quiet to way too f***ing loud. The voices are often mixed poorly, changing in volume from shot to shot, but I think the most impactful change of their overhaul to the mixing is the loss of almost all of the vocal effects. Honestly, at this point, I'm not sure if this was on purpose or on accident. I'm more apt to think it's an accident given that their GT box sets still have these effects. But for some reason, just about any and all vocal effects are completely absent in these box sets. Now, that can range from small stuff like people no longer sounding like they're talking through a telephone, or flashbacks no longer having that iconic reverby sound, to very big things like character voices completely changing. For example, from Super Boo on, there was a subtle deep voice filter effect that was applied over everything Boo said to make him sound a bit more menacing.
You're just a little sucker!
Whereas now in the box sets, that is absent and Boo sort of sounds like a teenager.
You're just a little sucker!
Even worse than that, though, is what they did to poor Android 19. Originally, he had a voice filter that made him sound very robot-esque, to emphasize how he was kind of an early model, I guess. I don't know, don't ask me. I'm not trying to get into the minds of 1990s Funimation. And while I personally think that filter was a bit silly, the problem is that when they removed that filter, they didn't think to re-record the lines here. So now we have these original line reads,
"We will destroy it. Yes, 20?"
that were intended for a crazy filter that just sound completely silly without them.
"We will destroy it. Yes, 20?"
It's really hard to express just how much the audio mixing is a disaster in these releases. Between this and the famously awful video quality, I very much get the impression that the original orange bricks were just rushed out the door and their audio quality suffered as a result, which makes even more sense now given that around the Boo arc, not only was their video color accuracy improving, but a lot of these mistakes and errors were starting to go away. You still had things like voice filters being absent or missing elements of the mixing like iconic delayed reverb effect of people talking in the time chamber, but at the very least the outright bad audio levels and misplaced lines were mostly a thing of the past. And yet somehow we're still not through. Because in addition to the messed up lines, the ruined audio mixing, the purposely worse music placement, and the missing voice effects, we have the final phase of Funimation's quest to drive me into a mental institution. The added lines. See, once again we're in a situation where one of the things people make fun of about the Funimation dub, that being the fact that it can never shut the f*** up and let there be silence, is actually largely a product of their changes to the box sets themselves. all over these things. Just about any time there's a long stint of silence, they add previously non-existent dialogue from someone off screen to fill the void. Majin Vegeta powering up to his extremely sick attack against Majin Buu, while the original had only silence, ambient sound effects, and suspenseful music. The box sets decided that every DBZ viewer has the attention span of a South Irish squirrel. Now instead, we are treated to Bobbity yelling endlessly at Buu through the entire process, not leaving even a moment for me to let the bad thoughts in.
Show him what happens to people who blow up my spaceship! Are you even listening to me?
This definitely is not an isolated example. Added lines where there was once silence is a near constant throughout these home releases, and look. I am not trying to be an old man yelling at a cloud here. I am, generally speaking, a guy that just likes to kick back and enjoy his TV in the living room. And to be honest, half of what I'm describing in this video are not necessarily objectively bad things, though the bad mixing, flub lines, added lines, missing effects, etc. are in fact bad. Most of this is more along the lines of, looking at what changed is neat. A fun little romp through the changes that Funimation has made both on purpose and on accident through the years of putting the series to box sets. But after last week's video, with the torture that is having no release of Dragon Ball that I can reliably recommend to any fan of the show, old or new, it is just insane to find that Well of Mistakes goes even further. Can we please just have one great release, one measly release, Master Funimation, in which the video looks how it's supposed to, the audio sounds how it's supposed to, nothing insane is added or taken away, and it's all as it should be. I just want to be able to watch the show as it was intended. Oh wait, what am I thinking? I barely watch anime, I read manga. Whatever.